From the late 2000s to the mid-2010s, I worked as a molecular biologist for a national security contractor on a project focused on studying exobiospheric organisms, or evos. I will share as much information as possible, though some details may be vague to protect my anonymity. If anything is unclear, feel free to ask for clarification. The goal of the program was to analyze the genome and proteome, the full set of proteins, of these organisms. Although research into evos has been ongoing for decades, the emergence of advanced DNA sequencing technologies in the late 1990s allowed us to break through previously stalled research. These breakthroughs have fundamentally changed how we view these organisms and even our place in the universe. What we've discovered is unsettling. The evo genome is a chimera, combining genetic material from Earth with elements of unknown origin. These organisms appear to be artificial, created for a specific purpose we don't yet fully understand. They are ephemeral and disposable, clearly not naturally evolved. I will provide evidence to support these claims after a brief overview. I've decided to share this information because I believe everyone has the right to know the truth. While these revelations will undoubtedly disrupt society, delaying them only increases the impact. I am sharing anonymously to protect myself and my family. This choice limits the reach and credibility of my message, but it is the furthest I am willing to go. I chose this platform for its balance of anonymity and visibility. To protect my identity, I may be intentionally vague or misleading about my personal details, like my role, education, or timeline, but the information I provide about the research itself is accurate. I have a PhD in molecular biology and ended up in this program largely by chance. I met a senior scientist involved in the project at a conference where I was presenting my PhD research. My project was not particularly groundbreaking, but I believe it was my attitude and ability to network that caught his attention. Shortly after graduating, I received a job offer. The interview process was unusual, with 3 increasingly strange meetings. As they progressed, the focus shifted away from my scientific expertise to other, less clear areas. The final step involved signing an extensive, non-disclosure agreement with a corporate lawyer who carefully explained the severe consequences of breaking it. My first weeks on the job were memorable but monotonous. I spent most of the time in an archive room, reading internal reports, memos, and procedures to familiarize myself with the research. There were no public references or guides, just dry, technical documents. Most of the material focused on the biology of evos, with occasional mentions of their food, religion, or culture. There was no information on their technology. The lab was located in a secure section of Fort Detrick, Maryland, in a basement area hidden from regular employees. Despite the sensitive nature of the work, the safety level wasn't as high as one might expect. The lab handling evo samples was rated at biosafety level 3, BSL-3, while other areas were only BSL-2. The BSL-3 lab included a freezer room and a cell culture lab. The freezer stored evo remains at -80 degrees Celsius in vacuum-sealed bags to maximize preservation. The room's air was controlled to reduce humidity. Only 4 partial evo carcasses were stored at this location, and all appeared to have suffered significant trauma, resembling severe accident victims. The lab team consisted of around 20 scientists, 4 senior scientists, and a director. The scientists, all PhD holders, primarily performed technical tasks. Senior scientists designed experiments, supervised the team, and occasionally did technical work themselves. The director rarely visited, focusing on setting priorities and attending meetings. Other than scientists, the lab had security guards from subcontractors, but no support staff like janitors or maintenance workers. Scientists were responsible for those tasks as well, ensuring everyone could handle any technical activity when needed. While the work was often routine, the implications of what we were studying were anything but. The more we learned, the more questions arose about the nature of these organisms and their purpose. The BSL-2 areas of the lab were primarily used for various assays, including immunohistochemistry, genetic engineering, and cell storage, while a separate cell culture lab handled more conventional cell lines. Beyond the labs, the facility had typical office amenities, though internet access was limited to senior staff. For bioinformatics, an internal intranet was available. Regarding the biology of the evos, I will begin with their genetics, followed by gross anatomy and biological systems. The information I share is a combination of my observations and what I have read. To make it more relatable, I will compare their biology to human systems wherever logical. First, let's discuss their genetics. Like humans, their genetic material is based on DNA, which was a surprising discovery. We'd expect beings from a different biosphere to have a fundamentally distinct biochemical system, but that is not the case. This similarity suggests that their biosphere shares some common ancestry with ours. Their cells are eukaryotic, meaning they contain a nucleus with organized genetic material, implying that their evolutionary path diverged from ours after the development of the eukaryotic cells. Interestingly, evo DNA is compatible with human cellular machinery. A human gene inserted into an evo cell can be expressed to produce a protein, and vice versa. However, differences in post-translational modifications, chemical changes after protein production, render these proteins non-functional in each of our systems. I will elaborate on this later. Evos have 16 circular chromosomes. Unlike humans, whose genomes contain large intergenic regions, non-coding junk DNA, the evo genome is highly condensed and uniform. In humans, about 99% of the genome does not code for proteins and includes evolutionary remnants like transposons or buffers to protect coding regions. While these sequences have some utility, such as serving as anchors for cellular structures, they are not highly structured. In contrast, evo genomes are remarkably streamlined. Their intergenic regions consist of repeated sequences with nearly identical spacing between genes. This uniformity creates a minimalist genome much smaller than ours, with fewer protein-coding genes. This design likely reflects both biological simplicity and genetic refinement. The consistency of their genome strongly indicates artificial origin. There is no known evolutionary process that could produce such efficiency. A striking feature of their genome is the presence of a highly engineered regulatory sequence, the tripalindromic region, TPR, located in the regulatory sequence of every gene. This 144 base pair sequence contains 3 palindromes, sequences that read the same forward and backward on complementary DNA strands. Each TPR includes unique identifiers, a chromosomal address specific to one of the 16 chromosomes, and a gene address unique to each gene. This precise addressing system allows for unambiguous identification of any gene's location in the genome. Such a feature is unheard of in natural biology. The presence of TPRs suggests that evogeneticists designed their genome for advanced engineering, enabling highly targeted insertion or removal of genes. Remarkably, no proteins within the genome interact with TPRs, implying that external tools, likely used at the zygote stage, perform these modifications. These tools are far beyond anything we currently possess. The artificial nature of the genome suggests that evos may be designed for specific roles, similar to how social insects like ants are specialized into soldiers or workers. This is speculative, as only one individual genome has been fully sequenced to my knowledge, making it impossible to confirm genetic variation among evos. Moving on to coding regions of the genome. Their genes are structured similarly to ours, including silencers, enhancers, promoters, exons, introns, and untranslated regions, UTRs. Many of their genes are strikingly similar to human or animal genes, matching nucleotide for nucleotide. These appear to be directly copied rather than modified, suggesting deliberate cloning from Earth life. In addition to these familiar genes, There are entirely novel ones not found in our biosphere. The purpose of these unknown genes remains unclear and is a key focus of ongoing research. The mix of familiar and alien genetic material further reinforces the idea that evos are artificially created. As for their mitochondrial genome, it had not been sequenced during my time on the project. It's likely to be just as streamlined as their nuclear genome, possibly incorporating a TPR-like system. Their genetic design, particularly the TPR system, implies a level of bioengineering sophistication far beyond what humans can achieve. The Evo genome not only suggests artificial origins, but also raises questions about their creator's capabilities and intentions. Morphologically, these beings resemble the grey aliens of modern folklore. They are about 150 centimeters tall, with 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head. However, their grey skin is actually a biosynthetic film that protects against liquids, but not temperature changes. Underneath, their real skin is white, hairless, and smooth, with folds only near joints. The skin is oily, according to some reports, and removing the grey film releases a strong smell of burnt hair and ammonia. The skin contains numerous pores, leading to glands that are part of an unusual excretory system, which may explain the smell. Their heads feature oversized eyes, small nostrils, a narrow mouth without lips, and ear canals without external auricles. They lack teeth, a tongue, and olfactory bulbs. Their eyes are covered by a semi-transparent film for environmental protection and light filtering. Beneath this film, their eyes are 3 times larger than human eyes, with no eyelids and exceptional night vision. Their retinas contain 6 types of cone cells, allowing them to perceive a broader spectrum of light. Their ears are more sensitive to low frequencies, likely due to the curvature of their cochlea. The brain is divided into 4 sections, connected to a central lobe that serves as both brainstem and cerebellum. It is 20% larger than a human brain, with more folds and a higher ratio of glial cells to neurons. Nodules on the central lobe appear to function as biological circuits, potentially for interacting with their technology. Studying these nodules is a top priority. Their necks are longer and thinner than human necks, with separate esophagi and tracheae, but no vocal cords. Their thoracic musculature is underdeveloped, with visible ribs and no nipples. The abdomen is wider and slightly protruding, with no navel. The pelvis lacks genitals or an anus. Their hands have 4 long fingers with no nails, and their feet have 2 toes, each made of fused digits. Finger muscles are located entirely in the hands, rather than extending into the forearms. Their bones are made of collagen, hydroxyapatite, and copper oxide crystals, with blood cells maturing in a thymus-like organ instead of bone marrow. Their respiratory system is similar to ours in that they need oxygen, but their lungs have a unidirectional flow, like birds, making them more efficient. This adaptation likely supports their brain's higher metabolic needs. Vocalizations are produced by vibrating membranes in the air sacs. Their circulatory system resembles ours, with a heart that pumps oxygen-rich blood through the body. Their blood is brownish due to high plasma and metal ion levels, particularly copper, which may neutralize ammonia and other waste products. Their excretory system is unique, with no large orifices like an anus or urethra. Instead, waste is filtered through a hepatorenal organ, combining kidney and liver functions, and excreted through pores in the skin. This system allows ammonia to evaporate from the skin, aiding in thermoregulation. Increased physical activity raises metabolism, producing more ammonia and cooling the body. The digestive system of the Evo is quite underdeveloped compared to humans. They don't have a traditional stomach. Instead, they have a pseudostomach that functions only as a reservoir for food, controlling the flow into their intestines. Their intestines resemble the human small intestine, focusing mainly on absorbing liquids and nutrients, where digestion primarily occurs. The intestines end at the hepatorenal organ, where any undigested material is processed and excreted through an extensive network of pores on the skin. There is also an organ near the pseudostomach that secretes digestive enzymes into the intestine. This organ, simply called the digestive organ, produces enzymes that break down proteins and sugars. Given their lack of teeth, narrow and rigid esophagus, and absence of a true stomach, it is believed that evos can only consume food in liquid form. The food they consume likely contains high amounts of carbohydrates and protein to support their high metabolic demands, especially for their brain. The food is probably a nutrient-dense broth, potentially containing copper to meet their biological needs. Because of these dietary restrictions, evos would likely struggle to survive in Earth's environment without technological help. The understanding of the evos' endocrine system is limited. It's known that their cells respond to bovine growth hormones, suggesting that their functions may be regulated by an endocrine system, but more research is needed to fully understand it. Regarding the immune system, there appears to be an innate immune system, but no clear evidence of adaptive immunity like in humans. The evos' thymus-like organ, located near the heart, is larger than in humans, and it is where their blood cells mature. These immune cells are high in copper and have granules, though more research is needed to identify how these cells function and to understand their surface receptors. The evos' nervous system is relatively straightforward. The spinal cord begins at the base of their brain and runs along the vertebral column, with ganglia along the spine. Aside from their brain, there are no major differences from human systems. Their musculoskeletal system is underdeveloped, with most human skeletal muscles having equivalent counterparts, though the hands, feet, and forearms are different. The muscle fibers are mainly of type 1 endurance fibers, outnumbering type 2 fast twitch fibers by about 10 times. There is speculation that artificial molecular machines potentially powered by copper may be present in their bodies, though no evidence has been observed yet. As for the questions, 1. Story sharing with Senate and AARO. No, the information has not been shared with either of them yet, and there is no solid proof beyond this message. 2. Bioengineered worker bees. Yes, the evo seems to be bioengineered and possibly disposable. Their purpose seems to be task-focused, and they likely need technological support to survive. They seem to be only alive to fulfill their tasks. 3. On their religion, the evo's belief system suggests that the soul is not an individual trait, but a field of nature that grows in complexity with the presence of life. Over time, this complexity leads to the emergence of sentient beings. These beings influence the soul field through their experiences, accelerating its growth until it reaches a critical mass, an event referred to as an apotheosis. This belief shapes their society, which doesn't value individuality, but instead focuses on nurturing life to achieve this apotheosis. After death, they believe the soul loses individuality, but retains memory as part of the greater field. This cultural perspective leads to a society that lacks fear of death and places little importance on personal well-being, instead focusing on shaping and nurturing life for the greater goal. 4. Lab location. The Patel National Biodefense Institute location is available on Google Maps, and it seems to be connected to this research. My dad was an engineer, and when I was 17, he took a job renovating a dam about 40 miles away from our house. At the beginning, it was just a normal job, but he started coming home more and more, I would almost say frantic. You could tell there was something wrong at work, maybe a bad coworker or something. My parents' relationship was strained as it was, and this stretched it to the limit. They started yelling at each other late at night, and one day at the dinner table, the straw broke. Dad told what was bothering him. The dam was haunted, he said. Mom and I stared at him, me in interest, my mom in annoyance, waiting for him to crack a smile and say he was just joking. The smile never came. He just got up and went to his office. Mom stared at her food for a while, then followed him. I hung around with an earshot to see what was going on. The conversation started out with my mom's raised voice, but gradually it became quiet, confidential. Dad agreed to refuse the job, to work a few more days until they could find a replacement, no more. This is where my intelligence came into question. I asked if I could come with him to work and see the ghost. He agreed, but told me to bring a friend. I called Josh, and he was stoked, and by the next day, we were riding in the cramped back seat of my dad's pickup towards the dam. Josh and I checked out flashlights, nothing fancy, just those little pen lights you get at gas stations. We were a far cry from professional ghost hunters. When we arrived at the dam, both Josh and I were struck by the somber mood that abounded in just about everyone. You could have told us that we were in a morgue, and it would have been easily believed. We followed Dad down through the concrete labyrinth, past the bypass, past the generators, deep down into the access and maintenance tunnels below where the construction was going on. Dad grabbed a 1 mil candle power light and 2 radios from one of the carts, not really stopping as he walked. It wasn't construction really, just patchwork to make sure the dam did not explode under pressure. Necessary little injections of concrete into compression cracks and that sort of thing. We went down some stairs that took an abrupt turn to the right and were met with a 100-foot long, unlit hallway with another set of descending stairs at the far end, lit by a single, naked light bulb. Alright, Dad started. This is it. All you have to do is walk down to the other end of the hallway and back. Feel free to turn back and come here at any time. I'll be standing right here with the torch. Just yell at me, and I'll light up the whole hallway. Take one of the radios with you, just in case. Noise has a way of getting trapped down here, he said, while gazing down the hallway. He was talking quietly, the sort of way you would if you were surrounded by sleeping creatures. Josh and I lit our flashlights and started walking down the hallway. Almost immediately, we began to feel pressure closing around us. It seemed the darkness itself had weight to it, pushing down on our shoulders, sneaking into our throats and choking us. We both walked slowly, concentrating on that light at the end of the tunnel, on our little bouncing pen lights. Dams are creepy places in general, and this one was no different. Minute shifts in the lake caused the dam to moan in a way, but not in a way you could hear. More like you could feel it moan, somewhere deep in your stomach. Little drips would become gunshots when reflected the right way. Ventilation shafts would seem to form whispered words. Voices from far off managed to appear right behind you. I had experienced these things before, in other dams, but this one was different, completely different. I suddenly snapped alert. Josh was whispering my name from somewhere. I became aware that we were laying down on the cold, moist, concrete floor. The light at the end of the hallway had gone out. Our pen lights did little to hold back the wet, seeping darkness that was constantly encroaching on us. I pulled the radio out of my pocket, whispering into it. Dad, turn on the light. No reply, just that silent static that filled the air around us. Josh and I turned around and looked behind us. We could see Dad still sitting on the steps. I wanted to yell for him, but I couldn't. If I opened my mouth, the darkness would come in, pouring, drowning me. The radio crackled up in my hand. Turn on the light. Turn on the light. Turn on the light, whispered someone. It was not my voice. It was a sick, wet, almost gurgling voice, guttural and deep. It originated from the gut instead of the throat. Josh and I pointed our flashlights at the radio, and he cursed as his light flickered and died. We were stuck, trapped in that hallway. We couldn't yell, we couldn't move, we could not use the radio. Josh, we have to try and get back. He nodded back, his face eerily lit by the pale blue penlight. I tried to ignore its brief flickering as we both started to crawl back down the hallway. Using the penlight to light the way in front of us, the darkness was complete, filling the edges of my eyes. Our whole world existed in that circle of dim light before us. Everything else was black. Then my hand touched something. I jumped backwards and pointed the penlight where my hand had been. Nothing. But I knew without a doubt what I felt. A foot. I had laid my hand down on the ankle of a human foot. It had been wet, slimy almost. The skin felt soft and bloated, ice cold. It was so vivid, I thought to myself. I had felt the calluses on the back of the heel, the wrinkles of skin, the tension of the dead muscle. I had surprised whatever I touched as much as it surprised me. Suddenly, Josh was yelling at me. He was gasping and spinning around on all fours, his eyes wide with fear. "What the fuck was that?" he started. Something touched me, put its hands on my back. He turned around and showed me the back of his shirt, a grey t-shirt that he wore in case it got dirty. 2 defined handprints were set in it, right behind his shoulders, showing easily against the rest of the shirt. Whatever hands had touched him had soaking wet hands. His face set as he looked forward. I followed. Up ahead, we could see Dad still relaxing on the stairs, with the light behind him, erasing all the details of his face. But there was someone else now. It was wearing a poncho, the heavy wet gear that dam workers who have to do deep work wear. Brief reflections of light around the silhouette showed its emergency yellow color. It was wearing a hat too, one of the rubber seal hats I had seen my dad wear on so many occasions. Someone else had come down to talk to Dad. Then I felt it look at me. From far away, even though Josh and I were in total darkness, I felt it look at me and knew, absolutely knew, it saw me. Then it started walking. It was a hurried walk with a heavy limp, a determined walk, the walk of a man who has something important to do, someone who is late, someone who wants to kill an intruder. I was paralyzed, there on the floor, shaking from the cold water seeping in through my shirt off of the floor, from fear of whatever it was that was walking at us. Closer, closer, closer. I pointed the flashlight at it, at him. He was maybe 30 feet away now. His walking had picked up pace. Little details shimmered in the penlight. His face was a sickly white, the eyes gray and swollen, only one pointing directly at us. The other, lazily drifting off to the left somewhere. His cheeks had dark blue veins showing through, and his lips were torn and rotting in places. Shimmers of light reflected back to me as droplets of water caught the light. Whoever the man was, he was soaking wet. Still closer. Too close. The radio. Dad was talking through the radio. "Are you boys okay back there? I'm turning on the light. Cover your eyes." I could not see him anymore. The man was close enough that he filled our view. His wet boots heavily slapping against the concrete. His wet, labored breathing seeming to slide across the walls until they reached my ears. It occurred to me that my flashlight had gone out, and at the same time, the boot steps stopped. I could hear the breathing though, only feet above me. Wet rubber squeaked against itself, and I felt a wet, swollen hand slide down the side of my face, then violently grip my hair and yank my hair back. Then the world erupted in light. Bright, unbroken light filled every corner of that damn hallway. "Why are you idiots laying down? What's wrong with Josh?" I heard my dad yell, unseen behind the bobbing light. He was running towards us. I looked over. Josh was face first on the concrete. He had passed out. I started shaking him, and he woke up, pushing me off him in fear at first. Dad reached us and helped me pick him up, then pointed the light down the hallway and dismissively shook his head. "Let's get out of here. I'm seeing things now. I thought I saw one of the other workers just go around the corner down there. Was he wearing wet gear?" "Yeah, why? Are you okay?" He squinted his eyes, almost knowingly at me. He had a unique experience, I thought to myself, probably every day for the last 2 weeks. "Why is your hair wet?" was the last thing I remembered him asking. I find myself waking up late at night now, soaking with sweat, thinking about that tunnel. Sometimes I can feel that wet hand on my face. Sometimes I feel the foot. Other times, I just see his silhouette at the end of the hallway. Any hallway. Afterwards, Dad fronted an effort to quintuple the amount of wired and emergency lights in that dam, and the personnel were more than supportive. He also suggested to change the emergency gear to red so that everyone was not jumping out of their socks every time they saw another worker.